I have to come to a point, and I came to a point many, many years ago where I became a Christian when I was young, and then of course you go through the course of understanding what Christianity is, right? And then you don't really take reading the Bible very seriously. You kind of skim over it. You only read the books that are nice, and everybody seems to love the book of James until they fully understand how powerful that book is, and it speaks about a lot of war. But later on, as I grew in my maturity as a Christian, I realized that this life, is really like a battleground. It's not a playground, right? If you think Christianity is a playground, you're going to have a really, really, really tough time as a Christian, right? Because there are too many Christians that honestly rely on themselves and their own power. And we're going to read a few verses, and then we're going to kind of jump right into this. But Paul the Apostle is going to say that you have to rely on on Jesus' power. You have to rely on the Holy Spirit. You cannot rely on your own power. I'll say it again. You can rely on your own power. And then when we begin to break down this enemy, we'll learn that, look, apart from the Lord, meaning without the Lord, Satan is stronger than you. Way stronger. Not even a little bit. Way stronger. He's smarter than you too. You can't outsmart the devil. He'll outsmart you every time, and that's how this whole sin thing started. But against the Lord, he's toothless and defeated. But without the Lord, he can be ferocious. He can create havoc. It's your choice, it's my choice. Do I battle alone or do I battle with the king? I mean, if you guys have ever watched Narnia, right? Have you ever watched Narnia? I hope you have. It's really a picture of spiritual battle. Think about Aslan, the lion, right? That's a picture of Jesus. When Aslan rose from the dead, the queen, who kind of pictured the enemy, was done. We serve a risen king. And for me, I'm already victorious. I don't fight, and I've said this, I think, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. You, Christian, you don't fight for victory anymore. You fight from victory, meaning you're already victorious and you're fighting from the inside out at this point. And Christians want victory, right? I want victory. You want victory. It could be my whole life. It could be certain situations in my life, but we struggle. I struggle, you struggle. My mind is a major battlefield, right? Really, all battles start in the mind. And Paul will show us that there is a way, but you have to obey. There's an obedience that we have to do. There are things that we have to do. And I'm not going to get through everything. I just can't. There's too much to get through. But it's very important. These are verses that we should all be familiar with. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 18. Interestingly enough, on Tuesday night during the men's Bible study, we brought this up. Mark had brought this up, and I think this is key because you know what? I said to him, look, as a man, there's only a couple things that men struggle with, if you think about it, right? We struggle with sexual temptation. We struggle with anger. Really, that's it. What else do we struggle with as men? That's all you struggle with. That's a man's struggle. What? Everything is birthed out of pride. You can't tell me. And women struggle with pride too, by the way. What I'm saying is, look, I heard this great quote many, many years ago, and I believe it. Scratch the surface of every sin, and underneath it is pride. Forget about the fact that pride is the foundation. I'm saying from a day-to-day walk, that's what men struggle with. You can't get over that. But for me as a man, and for you as women, and the men and women here, there is a formula. There is an ability to get through these battles. There is a way that God made for us to get through it. Now here, we have to understand a couple of things first, and then we understand the battle gear. This week, we'll understand the enemy. Next week, we'll understand the gear. Because without understanding who your enemy is and what he can do, how can you even know how to beat him, even though he's already defeated? Because the other day, Talim was asking me, she's like, I forgot, what's like a better, the war or the battle? I said, you have battles every day, but ultimately the war is the big one. I said, so the war has been won by Jesus, but every single day you and I have battles. So you have to know, and I have to know how to fight him. So Paul says this. Now, interestingly enough, in Ephesians chapter 6, this is the last chapter in the book of Ephesians, he says, finally, my brethren. Obviously, he's talking to the sister too, you know. He says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Right? That's a command. And I find it interesting. Why didn't Paul say this in Ephesians chapter 1? I always think about this stuff. Why didn't he say it right in the beginning? Right? And this is just common with human beings. We often remember the last thing we hear. You talk to someone one-on-one, you often remember the last 5 minutes, not the first 30. Right? That's true. So you're reading all these chapters now. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Some translations might have the trickery of the devil. Some may say the lies of the devil. It's just, he's a cunning foe. Verse 12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. That verse right there should make us understand that the problems we're having with people in our lives right now has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the enemy that's behind them. What do you mean by family? Could be. My boss? Yep. We're going to get to, Satan's abilities too. Verse 13, therefore, and anytime you see the word therefore in the Bible, you should ask yourself why it's therefore, right? It's therefore, Paul says, because of understanding verse 12 now, because you understand that you're fighting against not flesh and blood, you need to therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Notice how many times Paul says the word stand, by the way. Because if you're not standing, you're falling. As a Christian, we have to be able to stand against the enemy. Meaning you don't retreat, you go at him. Right? Sometimes you have to go on the offensive, and sometimes you have to play defense, but no matter however you're doing it, you're standing. David's a great example when everybody else was retreating. David said, I got God on my side. I'm going at him. And guess what? You know the story? Goliath fell. David didn't fall. Goliath fell. Verse 14. Stand therefore. And now Paul begins to explain the armor. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Verse 18, praying always with all prayers and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplications for all the saints. This means war, right? And why the title? Because when we read this, we see battle gear. Paul was picturing a Roman soldier, by the way. Remember, Paul was actually chained to a Roman soldier, so he's probably looking over at the soldier's gear. And it's saying, you know what? The Holy Spirit is probably telling him, Paul, that's how the Christian should be every day spiritually dressed. Now, Paul didn't get this out of thin air. A lot of all this stuff that's mentioned is also mentioned in the Old Testament. The breastplate of righteousness, the peace, the feet, But that's how the Apostle Paul saw the Christian life and how to be victorious. And that's how we have to see it. That's how we have to see it every single day of our lives. And if you don't, look, we all know this. If you take one day for granted, if you take the enemy for granted one day, it's over. It's over. And sometimes something we do one day affects months and years and other things in our lives. And I'm not saying that we're not going to have difficulties like that, and I'm not saying that there's no grace for that. What I'm saying is that what we can do is be prepared. And that's what we have to do. So the first point, and really the only one we're going to get to, and then there's some sub-points, is we need to know our enemy. You need to know your enemy. Paul says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. He said, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the dark ages, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Now, one thing we'll see later on is that Satan is really not your only enemy. Okay? He's not. I'm my own enemy. You know, I don't hate anybody in this world but one person. Old John. I hate old John. I hate my old self, because if I don't put on the armor of God, if I'm not walking in the Spirit, my old self comes out. And I don't want my old self to come out. There's a quote, there's a great book that A.W. Tozer wrote called I Talk Back to the Devil. Great book. Small. It's called I Talk Back to the Devil. Not a really popular, book or a title. You know, not many people, it's not like your daily reading, I Talk Back to the Devil. But it really is powerful. And here's what he said. He said, I'm not afraid of the devil, he said. He said, the devil can handle me, but he can't handle the one to whom I'm joined. He can't handle the one to whom I'm united. He can't handle the one whose nature dwells in my nature. Meaning, me and Jesus, the devil can't handle. Me and me, the devil wipes out. First, listen to this verse. This is what John said. He said, you are of God, little children, and have overcome them. And the them he's talking about is spirits in this world that are enemies of us. He said, because he, capital H, who is in you is greater than he, lowercase h, who is in the world. Meaning, I serve a God who is greater than the devil. So don't make the devil out to be more powerful than your God. Or, here's another thing, don't make them equal. They're not equal. They're not. One is God, one is not. So, speaking of this devil, we need to know who the leader is of this clan, and that's Satan. Now look, he has many names, and I wish I put this up, but I have like 9 written here, and it's my own fault, because I know if I would have sent it to Vanna would have put it up, but I forgot. And here's all the names that he's known as. Number 1, he's known as the accuser. Number 2, he's known as the adversary. Huh? What's boo? Number 3, he's known as the tempter. Number 4, he's known as a murderer. Number 5, he's known as a liar. Number 6, he's known as a lion. Number 7, he's known as, one believer that thinks that everything that happens in their life is the devil. Every wrong thing that happens in their life is the devil. I got a flat tire, it's the devil. My stomach hurts, it's the devil. I have a headache, it's the devil. No, maybe you just ate something that wasn't good. Maybe you need to, take care of yourself so you don't get headaches. Or maybe you shouldn't have, driven over the pile of glass. That's not the devil. Now look, that's one side, right? On the other side, there is the group of believers that take the devil very lightly too. Oh no, the devil can't do anything to me. I can walk through fire and not get burned. The Bible says in Proverbs, it says that can a man take fire to their chest and not be burned? That's a proverb. What that means is you can't take the devil lightly either. It could be him. I think a healthy believer, a healthy person that walks with Jesus is a person that is able to discern and understand, is it the enemy or is it just me? Right? Because what did I say before? I could be my own worst enemy. And I think all of you can agree that you are your own worst enemy. Because sometimes the devil, you know what he does? He doesn't even have to do anything. He just sits back and goes, they're going to mess up their own life. I don't have to do anything. Example of this, and I thought about this morning, so I don't have it up here. Forgive me. But David was a great example of two of those situations where so David had two massive sins in his life. Two, not one. Everybody thinks of one, by the way. But honestly, the second is greater than the first. The first one was when he, committed adultery with Bathsheba next door because she was outside taking a bath on a rooftop. There's that. And then the second one was, does anyone remember? When David counted, the adultery and murder were together. The second one was when he numbered his army. You're like, well, wouldn't adultery and murder be worse than just counting your people? You know what? One is a sin of the flesh. The other one is you don't trust the Lord. What's bigger in the eyes of God? They're both equal sins, by the way. Don't misunderstand me. Don't go out and commit adultery and kill people and say, well, it's cool, as long as I trust the Lord in the midst of it. No, it's not what I mean. Don't do either. What I'm saying is this, and the perfect example is right from the 2 Samuel chapter 11. I'm going to read one verse, and then I'm going to read 1 Chronicles 21:1. One of them, David, like I said, remember what I said? There are two types of believers. One that think everything's the devil, and one that thinks, whatever, no problem, the devil can't touch me. 2 Samuel 11:1 says, it happened in the spring of the year, and here it is, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel and destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. And what's interesting is, in verse 11, it says, but David remained in Jerusalem. Now you're saying, wait a minute, but he won the battle. But David was supposed to be at war. It says that when kings go out to battle, that is a David committed sin. David knows where he should have been, and David chose to stay home. That's important in all our lives, by the way, right? There are certain things we know we have to do. There are certain things we know we should do. Or how about this, then shouldn't do. And when we do it, what happens? We have situations like this. It may not be like end of the world type problems, but there's always a but. You should have stayed home. But you shouldn't have said that. But you shouldn't have tweeted that. But you shouldn't have put that on social media. But you shouldn't have what? You fill in the blank. That is a you problem, a me problem. Now, on the flip side, the second sin was a devil problem. First Chronicles 21:1. And what happened is that David was, for some reason, he wanted to count his people. And Joab, who was a nut job to begin with, told him, David, you don't need to count the people. Don't worry about it. Now look what 1 Chronicles 21 says. It says, now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. Meaning Satan had influence in this one. And David should have known better. So what does that mean for you and for me? We have to constantly be in prayer and be able to discern who's who. And how do I do that? Church, if you don't read the Bible, and if you don't constantly stay close to Jesus, if you don't know the real, you'll never be able to know the fake. The FBI has a counterfeiting department. Meaning they know how to know what counterfeit money looks like. They know how counterfeit everything looks like. Do you think that they send their people to go study the fake stuff or the real stuff? They go study the real. Why? Because the minute you see a real, you can immediately spot the fake. That's what I'm saying. As Christians, know your enemy, but don't be studying your enemy day and night. You study Jesus. So when the enemy comes, you'll be able to tell. David here, he was having these weird times in his life. During the time of Bathsheba, he chose to, I'm not going to go to war. We're winning. We're cool. I'm going to take time off. Now for you and for me, that's a symbolism, that's a symbol of prayer. If we're not constantly in prayer, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to always do the same thing. If I'm not praying constantly, if I'm not praying in my heart, in my mind, everything I do, Lord, I'm going into this situation. There's probably going to be a lot of temptation there. Please guard my eyes. Help me, protect me, Lord. I don't want to sin against you. And now, look, I said I don't want to sin against you. It's me. But there are other situations where I walk in and be like, Lord, I don't know who's going to be there. Please keep the enemy away from me. Please help me to be able to know and discern what's the enemy and what's of the flesh. It's very important, church, that you have to know your enemy. The devil's not your friend. Well, obviously, we know that as Christians. I know that as a Christian. But then why do we go in places where the devil dwells? If the devil's not my friend, why am I going into his playground? If you can't swim, why do you go in the deep end? Hoping what? Someone's going to save you? I have a floaty on. Floaties don't always work. Trust me, the enemy will always come into your playground. Don't go into his. Big difference. The enemy always comes into your playground because he hates you. Actually, I'll take it back. He doesn't hate you. He hates the God you serve, but because he can't defeat the God you serve, he picks on the children. That's how defeated he is. Anyway, I need to move quickly. I knew I wasn't going to get through this, but you know what? This type of stuff gets me not excited, but you know what? It gets me fired up a little bit because we as Christians, we have the instruction manual how to walk in victory, but we choose not to. And I speak from me too, not just you. I'm not up here saying, well, I figured it out. I kicked the devil right in the face. I don't. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 to 15. This is just an explanation of what happened to the devil and how he fell. It says, how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. That's his name, Lucifer. Obviously, you guys know that. That was his name. He was known as Lucifer. There were 3 archangels in heaven. There was Gabriel, there was Michael, and there was Lucifer. Gabriel was the archangel of he would be the guy that would bring messages to people, right? You see him in the Old Testament when he spoke to Daniel. You see him in the New Testament when he went to Mary and Joseph. He brought messages from the Lord, right? Michael is the fighting angel. I like Michael. Lucifer was the archangel of worship. That's why you notice in the music industry there's a lot of satanic activity. A lot. Why? Because that's how you suck people in with music. Music's cool. But what's the message in the music? How you are cut down to the ground, mighty of the world, for you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and rule the angels. I will take the highest throne. I will preside on the mount of assembly far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. But instead, you will be brought down to the pit of hell, down to its lowest pits. Now you talked about pride before, but that's really what got Satan kicked out of heaven. Pride. Pride You guys opened the door, by the way. Now I'm going to talk about pride. Pride keeps a lot of people out of heaven.